How long can a nation tolerate violations of its airspace before it must respond with force? This is not a theoretical exercise, but a pressing reality on NATO's eastern flank. For a sovereign state, control over its skies is a pillar of security. Each unauthorized entry is a calculated probe of reaction times and political will. When these tests become persistent, the question shifts from if a response is necessary to how and when. Poland, a nation aware of its geography and history, has been forced to answer. For months, a pattern of provocations has unfolded. Russian cruise missiles aimed at Ukraine have veered dangerously close to Polish airspace. Drones and fighter jets have engaged in aggressive maneuvers, testing NATO's air policing missions over Poland and the Baltic states. These are not accidents, but deliberate acts in a campaign of intimidation. The answer from Warsaw was unequivocal and delivered on the world's highest diplomatic stage. At the United Nations Security Council on September 22nd, the issue was brought into the global spotlight. The chamber became the venue for a stark warning, forcing world powers to acknowledge the growing risk of a direct clash between Russia and a NATO member. Taking the podium, Poland's foreign minister, Radoslaw Sikorski, dispensed with ambiguity. He framed the recent incursions as a systematic challenge to European security. Then, he delivered a message aimed squarely at the Kremlin. Any Russian military aircraft, manned or unmanned, that violates Polish airspace will be shot down. This was not a threat, but a statement of policy. A new rule of engagement based on the right to self-defense. Moscow's reaction was predictably furious. State media decried the statement as a dangerous escalation, threatening retaliation. But Warsaw remained unmoved.
You have been warned.
The era of issuing diplomatic protests with no teeth was officially over. Poland's new doctrine is built on a clear-eyed assessment of the threat, understanding the distinction between incursions. Small reconnaissance drones are a low-level provocation. The real danger lies with advanced military hardware, like a cruise missile or a fighter jet. Their intrusion carries an unacceptable risk of miscalculation. Therefore, Poland's response will be proportional but decisive. An intruding fighter jet or missile will be treated as an immediate hostile threat. This hard line reflects a consensus across the Polish political spectrum. Prime Minister Donald Tusk publicly reinforced the policy.
We will take the decision to shoot down flying objects when they violate our territory and fly over Poland. There is absolutely no discussion about that.
This unity demonstrates a fundamental shift in national defense strategy, backed by the full authority of the state. The message to Moscow is clear. Actions now have consequences. This shift from passive monitoring to active defense is profound. The old procedure was to scramble, escort, and complain. Now, active defense means the default response is to act. Public declarations are matched by concrete preparations. Air defense units are on higher alert, and NATO coordination has intensified. Warsaw acknowledges the risks, but has calculated that the risk of inaction is greater. Russia has been put on notice. A new perilous red line has been drawn. Poland stands firm, backed by its allies, and a population determined to defend its sovereignty. Poland's warning did not occur in a vacuum. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization, an alliance built on the principle of collective defense, began to mobilize its diplomatic and military frameworks. Support across Europe gathered with remarkable speed, not just in words, but through established protocols. At the heart of this response is NATO's Allied Air Policing Mission, a 24/7 shield where fighter jets are on constant standby, ready to scramble at a moment's notice to investigate any unidentified aircraft. On September 25th, Bloomberg reported Europe's private messages to Moscow. Behind the scenes, envoys from France, Germany, and the United Kingdom delivered a stark, coordinated message to their Russian counterparts. The warning was unambiguous. Future violations of sovereign airspace would be met with a decisive, forceful response, according to their established rules of engagement. This diplomatic pressure was underscored by events in the air. When a trio of Russian MiG-31s reportedly breached Estonian airspace, the system worked exactly as designed. NATO Quick Reaction Alert jets were scrambled, intercepted the Russian aircraft, and professionally escorted them out. This wasn't a negotiation, it was an enforcement of boundaries. Behind closed doors, Western officials were under no illusions, assessing the incursion not as an accident, but as a deliberate probe, a calculated test of NATO's reaction time and political will. Moscow, in turn, attempted to reframe the narrative. A Russian diplomat publicly linked the airspace incursions to Ukrainian attacks on military targets in occupied Crimea, implicitly blaming NATO for providing the support that made those attacks possible. This rhetoric aims to portray Russia not as the aggressor, but as a nation responding to a wider confrontation with the West. Paradoxically, this framing only strengthens Poland's legal and political justification. By casting the conflict in such broad terms, Moscow inadvertently validates Poland's argument that protecting its border is an act of self-defense. The alliance's key European pillars moved in lockstep. Germany signaled tight coordination with Poland, France, and the UK. While there were few bombastic public declarations, the diplomatic alignment was unmistakable. Through shared intelligence and joint planning, the major European powers demonstrated they were squarely on the same page as Warsaw. But the most critical piece of the puzzle was the unequivocal backing of the United States. When asked directly if he supported Poland's right to shoot down aircraft violating its airspace, the American president's response was simple and powerful. That single endorsement was transformative. It elevated a national policy from a single frontline state into a clear NATO-backed red line. With Washington's immense military and political weight now formally behind them, European allies can act with full confidence that their actions are supported by the entire alliance. This removes any ambiguity and projects credible, unified resolve. The calculus for Russia has now fundamentally changed. Any future incursion is no longer a low-risk probe. It's a high-stakes gamble where Moscow risks the tangible loss of advanced fighter jets, expensive weaponry, and its highly trained, difficult-to-replace pilots. What was likely intended as a test to expose cracks in NATO's resolve has backfired, creating the opposite effect, a more unified and determined alliance. The escalation calculus shifts dramatically when the alliance stands as one. This collective defense posture erodes Moscow's ability to use intimidation at the border. From Brussels to Washington, Europe and America now speak with a single, resolute voice. Stay out of NATO skies, or face the consequences. Moscow's response was swift and furious, broadcast across state-controlled media. The Kremlin framed Poland's warning not as a defensive measure, but as an act of aggression, escalating a narrative designed for both domestic and international audiences. The message was clear. Any direct engagement would be interpreted as a declaration of war.
NATO is at war with Russia. This is obvious and needs no proof.
This statement from Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov aims to blur the lines, portraying NATO's support for Ukraine as direct participation in combat, a rhetorical strategy to justify potential escalations.
If NATO shoots down a Russian plane, this will be war.
Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov reinforced this narrative, claiming that by arming Kiev, NATO and the EU have declared a hybrid war on Russia. This rhetoric serves a dual purpose. It rallies support at home by framing the conflict as an existential struggle against the West, and it attempts to deter further aid to Ukraine. It creates a pretext, a justification held in reserve, should Moscow choose to escalate. So if Russia were to act on these threats, how would its military stack up? On paper, the comparison against Poland alone seems lopsided. Russia's active military personnel dwarf Poland's, and its inventory of aircraft, tanks, and armored vehicles shows a significant numerical advantage. Moscow's defense budget is more than double Warsaw's annual spending, but these headline figures tell an incomplete and misleading story. Superior numbers don't guarantee victory, a lesson Russia has learned at great cost. 2 years of brutal warfare in Ukraine have severely degraded its military. Significant losses in advanced equipment and experienced personnel mean their effective strength is far below official inventories. Issues with maintenance, logistics, and low pilot training hours have been consistently exposed. In contrast, Poland has been rapidly modernizing its forces with cutting-edge Western technology. Their high morale, the resolve to defend their homeland, and a culture of tactical innovation are powerful assets. Poland will not fold easily. But the most critical factor is that Poland wouldn't fight alone. An attack on Poland is an attack on all 32 NATO members. This is the cornerstone of the alliance. Article 5, the Collective Defense Clause. Invoking it would bring the combined military and economic might of North America and Europe into direct conflict with Russia. The disparity would be overwhelming. NATO's combined air forces are larger, more technologically advanced, and better trained. In a conventional war against the full alliance, Russia knows it cannot win. This stark reality fundamentally changes the calculus for Moscow. Every provocation along the NATO border becomes an incredibly high-stakes gamble. While Russia's rhetoric is fiery, its actions are constrained by the knowledge that crossing a definitive line could trigger an immediate and overwhelming response. Deterrence is strongest when unity is unmistakable, and now it is. History offers a clue to what might happen next. In 2015, Turkey shot down a Russian Su-24 that crossed into its airspace. The crisis was intense, but did not devolve into war. Moscow punished with sanctions and sharp rhetoric. It bolstered defenses, then stepped back from direct conflict. Turkey's NATO membership stayed Russia's hand. Today, tensions are higher, rhetoric harsher. Poland has issued clear, repeated warnings. Only a new incursion will test that resolve. Poland and Estonia invoked Article 4. Allies met on September 23rd. NATO pledged military and non-military tools within international law. Precise rules, warnings, thresholds, proportionality are being refined. Expect continued consultations, heightened vigilance, and readiness. One miscalculation could spiral into a clash. The coming weeks will reveal whether Poland's warning deters Russia or marks a more dangerous chapter in European security.